We thank you for watching this KVUE Plus special presentation of the impeachment trial of Ken Paxton.
Our coverage will begin in just a few moments.
The top law enforcement officer in the state of Texas impeached.
Republicans and Democrats in the Texas House of Representatives overwhelmingly adopting 20 articles for misconduct.
It's 10 times worse than it's been covered.
Ken Paxton maintaining his innocence, calling it all politics.
And they are showcasing their absolute contempt for the electoral process.
Now all eyes are on the Texas Senate for the first impeachment trial of a Texas Attorney General.
Everyone will do their job to the utmost in fairness.
KVUE's special coverage of the impeachment trial of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton starts now. We thank you for joining us on KVUE Plus. I'm Ashley Goudeau.
And good evening to you. I am Tony Plohetski. Right now, Attorney General Ken Paxton's fate, as we have been telling you for the past 7 hours, it is in the hands of senators who are serving as a jury in his impeachment trial.
Yes, we are now entering, as Tony alluded to, hour 7 of deliberations. The case went to the jury at about 12 noon, and there has certainly been a lot of questions within this last hour swirling about the Capitol as people have seen senators leaving the room. So before we get to that, Tony, you talked to us during the 5 and 6 newscast about what we understood at that point was happening and where the senators were. Break that down.
Inside a room within the Capitol, the Betty King room, it is a large enough room, of course, to accommodate 30 senators as they were deliberating. It was our information that they had each surrendered their cell phones, or at least agreed as a group to keep their cell phones away. They were not in that room with their laptop computers, but were really in there only with pen and paper. But as you mentioned, Ashley, there have been some developments within the past 45 minutes that also raise questions about the status of this deliberation.
So let's get to it. Some other journalists have shared things on Twitter that at one point, this is from Sergio Martinez Beltran, who works for NPR. He actually got video, if we can advance to the next tweet there, of State Senator Charles Schwartner, a Republican from Georgetown, leaving his office, so that he had left the room where they were deliberating and went to his office on the 3rd floor. And then they saw him getting into an elevator, presumably with 2 staffers. You then have Matt Stringer, who is a reporter for a publication called The Texan, who caught this video of Schwartner actually walking outside of the Capitol grounds. That's on the other side of the gate, walking towards, on Congress Avenue, the governor's mansion.
And so obviously that raised questions, Ashley, about the status of these deliberations, whether or not they were nearing an end, or what exactly was going on within the body. You can see our colleague Laura McGahee there also tweeting that she had seen Senator Nichols, outside that deliberation room. You can see it there. She said he was spotted going from the chamber to the elevators. She's asking perhaps to his office, they're not deliberating for the night. And Ashley, she's pointing that out because Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had essentially assigned them to work until at least 8 p.m. this evening. And obviously that tweet being released well before 8 o'clock this evening. So that is something that we are continuing to watch in terms of their activity and whether or not the deliberation could be possibly nearing an end, or whether it could extend well into the night. Keep in mind, the Lieutenant Governor said he wanted them to work until at least 8 o'clock, but did actually leave open the possibility that they could work beyond that if they so desired. And again, his assignment is that if they do not reach a verdict tonight, that they return at 9 o'clock in the morning.
And one of the things about these deliberations that are different from a criminal trial is that all of the jurors will not reach a single unified verdict, but it is rather how each individual senator plans to vote on each of the 16 articles. However, There were rules that he laid out, and we have the sound from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick that I want to play for you. It is the charge that he gave senators, kind of the rules he was giving them about how deliberations were going to go. Take a listen.
When each member has come to their individual decision, they will come to the floor and vote one by one on each article. They will not have their phones with them during deliberations. They will not talk to staff during deliberations, legal counsel, or anyone else, members, only to each other during deliberations. They will be allowed, if necessary, depending on how long the deliberations go, to sleep outside the Capitol. But under strict rules, members, you shall have no communications with anyone. You may not look at television, you may not look at your phone, unless it's a call from a family member, and they should not discuss anything. It should only be for a family personal issue. You can tell your kids good night, or your wife or your husband, but you shall not read any news, look at any news, go online, open up your computers.
And so with that, with those statements to them, certainly we saw in the video of Senator Schwartner with two of his staffers, speaking with two of his staffers, which goes directly counter. You can see that video here captured again by NPR journalist Sergio Martinez Beltran, clearly going against that very clear directive from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Now, we want to note Governor Patrick has not commented about that on Twitter or addressed it to our knowledge in a public way.
And I think, Ashley, as if tensions were not already high in the Capitol, and particularly among this body, the senators, certainly the reality that we are seeing with our own eyes, that some of them have chosen to leave the deliberation room, go back to their office, or be seen on the Capitol grounds. As you can imagine, the fact that their colleagues are still presumably inside that room, working through these articles, the many prongs of the articles, and trying to weigh both individually and as a body and with their colleagues how they may intend to vote on these articles.
And just the gravity. This is the gravity of what they are deciding here, that we have not seen a statewide elected official impeached in Texas in 106 years, that there have been only 3 impeachments in Texas history, if you include this impeachment. And so to see senators leaving this area, and we want to note and a couple of notes about the Betty King room, they certainly still have access to restrooms and to food and beverages and things of that nature.
Which you can rest assured, meals are being brought in.
Yes,
meals are being brought in.
There's not necessarily that area. The Betty King room is actually located behind the Senate chamber, and so where there are other things, restrooms, offices, also a back elevator. I just want to add that part. That there was not necessarily a need to leave that area to do things like if someone says, oh, perhaps he was just using the restroom, probably not outside the Capitol grounds.
With the Lieutenant Governor, again, really underscoring the gravity of this situation and his directions about how senators are to comport themselves during the pendency of this deliberation.
All right, and let's talk a little bit more about the deliberations and the vote. It will be a very sort of slow process, if you will, in terms of how this will all work. Once the senators have decided how each of them plans to vote, we have been told that we will get at least 30 minutes notice, perhaps a little more, given to the media, to the public. It will be on the Court of Impeachment website so everyone can know and be watching. When they come into the chamber, they will all be seated, and the question will be set before them: shall this article be sustained? They will write their vote on a piece of paper. The bailiff, Austin Osborne, who is a sergeant of arms of the Senate but is serving as the bailiff, will collect all of those in a basket and hand that basket to the Secretary of the Senate, Patsy Spall. She will read at random all of those votes aloud and then give a count at the end of the ayes and nays. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick will then conduct a voice vote. He will call on each senator to verbally confirm their vote in the Senate for the record. If an article of impeachment is sustained by a 2/3 vote of the members, that would be 21 of the 30 voting members, AG Paxton would be convicted. If that happens, he is automatically removed from office. And once they go through that, there is then a second vote where each side gets 15 minutes to have arguments on disqualification of office.
And Ashley, there had been some discussion, a motion filed by the House impeachment managers day before yesterday as to whether or not they would actually consolidate those votes. And what I mean by that is whether or not a guilty verdict, a conviction, I should say, regarding one of the articles, whether or not that would necessarily translate to a permanent disqualification of office. That had been up for consideration, but then, as we know, the House managers pulled that motion back. So the original plan is now in place with regard to if there is a conviction, there is then a secondary vote with regard to whether or not Ken Paxton should be banned from ever holding public office in Texas again, essentially killing his political career.
Or he could be acquitted, and that means he would resume. He's been suspended. When he was, the vote to impeach him automatically caused him to be suspended, but he would go back into office. This is video of him from today, actually. We only saw Paxton twice throughout these 9 days of proceedings. He was 10 days of proceedings. It all starts to run together a little bit for me, Tony. Initially, that was to enter his plea. We saw him, did not hear from him, but he was in the courtroom the day that happened. And then he returned today for closing statements. And
much has been made about his lack of attendance. Certainly, Paxton supporters have said that he should not be there, that there is no need to dignify this whole impeachment trial with his presence. But at the same time, others read that differently, saying that they believe that it indicated something of a dismissive approach by Ken Paxton over a trial that holds so much import, not only for him and his office, but also for the entire state. Again, as we've underscored multiple times, this is the first time in a century, more than a century, that a statewide elected official has faced this exact proceeding that could lead to their ouster from office. And again, if that were to happen, a second vote would be taken as to whether or not he could ever serve Texas again.
And I'm going to correct myself again. It is 9 days. So day 9 of this. Again, we are going to be watching as that 8 o'clock hour comes up now. We're about 45 minutes away from 8 o'clock, but again, they could go longer if they so choose, if that is the decision. And obviously, we're trying to get more information about the senators who have left the room. Of course, we'll bring you the latest updates as they happen.
Stay with us. We'll be back as soon as we have more information.